For the seventh year in a row, we convene on the Left Wing podcast to assess yet another Leinster Champions Cup collapse. But while we have gotten used to discussing Leo Cullen's men's failings at this time of year, nobody, and I mean nobody, would have predicted how last Saturday at the Aviva Stadium would unfold. Not only did Northampton Saints claim a famous victory, but they shredded Jack Nienaber's airtight defence to the tune of 37 points and 5 tries. And 37 points is what Leinster had conceded in their 4 previous Champions Cup games combined. So a bolt from the blue in that regard. If not, I suppose Leinster coming up short again in Europe. The quest for that 5th title goes on into an 8th season next year. I am Will Slattery. I'm delighted to be joined for today's Left Wing podcast by Cian Tracey and Luke Fitzgerald. And lads, it was such a big podcast that initially I suppose I was guilty of some podcast complacency myself, because I had booked a week in Italy to coincide with this week, because I thought might not be too much to talk about. But given what happened on Saturday, Cian, you were teed up to host it podcast, but I sent a quick text to Shane yesterday and said, look, tag me back in. I'm coming back. There's too much to go through. I can't sit out this one.
Yeah, like I had all my work done last week to step into what were big shoes, Will, and they've all my notes, all the work that I've done just gone down the Swanee. But yeah, I do enjoy that you're bringing the sort of party to the occasion here in your shirt, and Luke is all business, but definitely serious business to discuss here, lads.
And you know what's funny? Me, Luke and Cian has been the combo for 5 years in a row now. I went back and checked 5 Leinster Champions Cup failing debriefs in a row. So I just thought we can't break up this trio. This is the trio that has had the history with the show over the last couple of years. Like, Luke, there's so much to get into. But I wanted to start with a specific. I mentioned in the intro there, going into the game, one thing people definitely thought Leinster had this year versus other years was this Nienaber defence. It held Quinn's tryless and pointless, same with Glasgow. What did you see, especially in that first half when they conceded 4 tries, but even in the second half when Northampton came back and kind of shredded them again for that crucial 5th try to push it out to 10 points again? Like, what on earth happened with the defence? That was the one point of difference people were specifically pointing to this year, and it was completely undone, utterly undone. What did you see from that perspective?
I saw a lot of unusual stuff, Will. Like, it's very hard to get it all into one very succinct answer, but I will try. I think the tackling was atrocious, one-on-one. Way too many missed tackles. You've heard me go on and on about this, and I know I got a lot of stick for saying about this. Oh, these kind of tactical misses, pushing people back into the right positions. But the tackle technique is a big problem. Not a commitment issue, but a technique issue. I didn't think they defended as a unit, which is absolutely crucial with this defense. Like, they defended in 1s and 2s. I thought their kick chase was really sloppy. Lovely line from Finn Smith, but it's only him. I think it might have been. I don't know if it was Freeman. I'm not sure who threw the pass to him for the first try, but what a line Finn Smith takes. I think you're right, yeah. But his line is fantastic. But if you look at the kick chase, like Josh van der Fleer, just like he has to keep up with the guys in the middle, but he never once looks over his shoulder to the right to see if he's connecting with anyone. And that was Cian Healy that was on his outside. And I have to say, I thought, I think it was Big Joe Mack. Obviously, was very slow off the deck to get moving as well. To kind of to get into that space. I think he tackles Finn Smith rather than misses him if he starts running a bit bit earlier and a bit quicker. I think they were complacent all the way through, and it you could see it in their attack. I just thought the amount of offloads. Like, they did not try, and I'm actually bleeding into the attack, but I'm sorry, Cian, but the two are very interlinked. You could see it quite clearly with how often they were trying to offload, which means to me that they weren't learning the lessons either when it wasn't going right. But dominate the contact first. Like, how many times Snyman was tried for an offload? Just use your 6'10" body, get low, punch through a hole. Back the other guys around you to get them on the next phase. It was just so sloppy. And then the numbers to ruck, they just did not resource rucks properly at all. And Pollock had a field day. He was the best player on the pitch, I thought. He was unbelievable. I really thought, believed the hype with that guy. He is an absolute animal, that guy. So I know it bled in there, but the two are very interlinked in my mind. So I'm so disappointed for them. I really think this would have been their year. And they saved their worst performance for that Northampton match. So I'm so disappointed for them. Yeah, but that's what I think went wrong with it. Lots of things there I know, but try to be as short as possible. I'm a bit depressed. I'm actually depressed about it.
Yeah, Cian, like I was reading your coverage of the game, you kind of made the comparison, the mirror image to maybe how Ireland performed in a couple of big knockout games and maybe the inability to kind of bring your best when it matters. Luke touched on a couple of different aspects of it there. Like, what's kind of your overriding thoughts now, a couple of days later? Because it's funny, like when Leinster have been turned over in Europe before, you could kind of rationalise it to a degree of, okay, they lost to Toulouse, La Rochelle, Saracens, who were the best team in the tournament other than themselves. So it's kind of, maybe you look at it that way if you're Leinster, but there's no rationalising this one. This is a team that came as massive underdogs. To be fair, you had been teeing them up as a really potent attacking threat. You pointed to Sam Bestie in particular as a guy who's done really good work with that attack. But no one can look at the two squads and say anything other than Leinster on paper have a massive advantage. And yet it didn't look like that at all on Saturday. So what are you thinking now?
Yeah, I go back to that piece that I wrote, Will, on Sunday/Monday. I do think there's a mental fragility here with this Leinster team, and I think it is a bit of a mirror in terms of Ireland at World Cup quarterfinals. And is it any wonder that Ireland have never got past a World Cup quarterfinal when the bulk suppliers to the Ireland team for the last number of years can't, like, they continuously fluff their lines in the tournament that they themselves pride themselves on. So, like, what I mean by a mental fragility, I totally agree with Luke. I think they were complacent. I think they were complacent in terms of their team selection, and I think that fed into the players as well. I know we'll get on and talk about that. I just thought their mindset seemed to be really off. I'd like to touch on the opening game, or the opening part of the game, in a sec. Just go back to another point that Luke made. Like, in contact, I still struggle to see or understand how that Northampton pack were able to overpower Leinster, because all week we would have been talking about last week, and you're right, Will, I had highlighted that Sam Bessie's attack I thought would ask different kind of questions that Leinster have faced all season. But when you look at the two packs on paper, like, Leinster made that Saints pack look like the prime Springboks. I thought it was absolutely shocking. And I think that's down to a mindset thing as well in terms of trying to dominate your opposite man in collisions. But I was watching it back a couple of times, and I want to touch on the opening sort of 7 minutes that led to the opening try, which Luke has touched on for Freeman. The amount of mistakes was just incredible. So 2 minutes into the game, Leinster are in a great attacking position from a line out, and their maul gets turned over. They get there's a free kick, then Cian Healy concedes from the scrum. So that's 2 errors already inside the opening 2 minutes. James Lowe, I thought it was a very harsh penalty, I have to admit, the one that he gave away in 4 minutes when the ball was thrown off his head. But it's still a penalty that Leinster coughed up. 5 minutes, James Gibson Park throws a really poor pass to Caelan Doris on the touchline, a hospital pass really. But Doris, instead of just trying to get himself back in field, compounds it with a really loose offload, which Luke again has touched on. Snyman, I thought, had a really poor game. 6 minutes, the scrum was under huge pressure from a Northampton pack that shouldn't have been able to dominate Leinster. Sam Prendergast gets kicked down. There's another poor kick chase. Max Deegan is asleep at the ruck and allows Northampton to make several metres. And then we come to 7 minutes in when Luke has already outlined it. The kick chase from Prendergast kick downfield was absolutely appalling, really. And I think unbelievable credit is due to Saints the way they had identified it. You can see Finn Smith scanning the space from very very early on when Ram gets the ball, and I think they would have identified holes in the Leinster defence. But for it to be carved open, Will, as early as that, like, that's about 10-11 mistakes in the opening 7 minutes, which, like, is just an absolute killer. Because we go back to, again, I know we're going to talk about the sort of team selection, but when you're heavy favourites for a game, what you want to do is get on top of them early. You're at home, get the crowd into the game, and make Northampton believe that, look, this is not going to be their day again. Instead, the amount of belief that Saints got after those opening 7 minutes, and then the sin binning period when Curtis Langdon goes to the bin just after Leinster scored the try, you're thinking, okay, now Leinster are really going to kick on here. And they lose the sin bin period 7-0 when Henry Pollock scores that sensational try. So to me, that all plays into, Will, the mindset, the mentality around the game. And I just thought Leinster were off. And like you've said, the three of us have sat here over the last number of years, and there's been different reasons for how they've lost, but ultimately, I just think it's become a mental block now for them. I think several of the players have spoken about how they're obsessed with winning this fifth star. Of course they are, but sometimes I wonder, do you want, like, can you want something too much? And does that make you overthink things? Does that make the coaches overthink things in terms of selection? Does that make the players, like the body language of some of the players, and Luke is kind of touching it there.
They looked tired, didn't they? Did you think they looked tired at points?
They looked undercooked, Luke. And like you look at what Northampton did the previous week in terms of hammering Bristol. They rolled out all their players. Leinster's players basically had the week off against Scarlet. So I think that's an issue as well. I think Leinster too often come into big games at the business end of the season, and their players have been minded too often this season.
And I want to add to that, because the last Irish team that won a cup, or not a cup, but like won a competition, was Munster. And they had to back up week after week after week at the end of the season. There's something to that, guys. You have to risk guys getting injured. You have to be playing against teams who are fighting for their lives. Like playing against Scarlets last week, they were they're trying to stay in or get involved in that kind of knockout part of the URC, which is all that's left in their season. That would have been a really valuable hit out. You could take the lads off after 60 minutes, empty the bench then. But I just feel that's a really great point that Cian made. And one other thing, Will, that I'd love to get your opinion on too is, I heard no chat about James Ryan. Like, he is crucial to this pack. I honestly think people, like, I know Rory is as a love-in with Snyman, and I know everyone accused me of the same with Ryan. But I feel like every time he's not there in the big matches, Leinster don't look the same. They don't look the same. That guy goes out to absolutely marmalise every single bit of contact that he hits. I thought he was the reason that they lost that La Rochelle one a couple of years ago when he went off in 25 minutes. But I thought they really missed him. And another guy I think that they really missed, who's really gone off the boil, was Frawley. Honestly, like I guarantee he'd have been stepping back, or he'd have been stepping over that kick at the end. He'd have said, "No, lads, hang on a second here. We've got the advantage. We've got to where we want them. They're wilting. Like, let's take 3 and let's end. Like, more time on the clock is good for us at the end." Or he'd have taken a drop kick. I don't know, guys. I just, also by the way, he'd have tackled. You cannot pick someone in the big matches who's not willing to put the body on the line, and that's a key point.
There's loads of things there that I want to touch on. Firstly, on the James Ryan point, like, you look at the last 3 defeats that Leinster have had in the Champions Cup. He got injured after 20 minutes against La Rochelle in 2023. He was on the bench. People might remember he was selected on the bench in 2024, which was funny because people were talking about how Snyman wasn't allowed to start ahead of James Ryan. Well, they started Jason Jenkins ahead of him last year. That didn't seem to be a problem then. And then obviously this year he was missing as well. I think if you had asked people before the game, they would have preferred RG Snyman to start. I think a lot of people, but you saw the performance that, to Luke's point, like the amount of offloading he does. Sometimes you just wonder, like, the size of the guy. Would he not truck it up and punch a hole the way Joe McCarthy did on a few occasions? Like, had some really big carries. Like, Snyman was offloading at every opportunity, which it's funny. I had a discussion with someone about this after the match. Why is Joe
McCarthy getting picked ahead of James Ryan? Why is that not even up for debate? Can someone answer me that?
They like his size, I think, in short, that he's a bigger unit. I think that's in simple terms. I think that's it. But I agree. I think I know you mentioned James Ryan quite a bit, Luke, and I would be of the same opinion. I think he is quite underrated, but I do think Will makes a good point as well. I think you look at how well RG Snyman has played for Leinster across the course of the season. I think a lot of Leinster fans would have been happy to see him there, but I guess what you're missing is, starting James Ryan and having RG Snyman come off the bench would have been a much better impact. So they definitely did miss him in that regard. But look, I think even without James Ryan, we're not talking about one of the elite packs in Europe here. Like, Leinster should have had more than enough quality on the bench and in the starting 8 to have had too much quality and power for Northampton. I think the backs are a different story altogether, but I think the pack deserve enormous credit for giving the backs a platform.
And in particular, like, their maul defence was startling on Leinster, because people might remember back to the Champions Cup final last year against Toulouse. Like, Leinster went to the corner quite a bit, and Toulouse repelled them all on a number of occasions, in particular in that first half. But there's one thing when it's Toulouse, then it's Malvaka and Miafu and Francois Croce and all these guys. Not that Northampton don't have some good guys in that forward pack, but even from last year, they've lost Courtney Laws, Lewis Ludlam, David Ribbons, like kind of some of the key big bruising bodies. So that I agree with Cian. That was not an area people anticipated Northampton getting on top. The back line and creating a few tries. less so, albeit not again to the degree that that it happened. And in terms of being undercooked, like you can say categorically that Leinster have not once in the last 5 years played the same team the week before their Champions Cup elimination. It's always been at least half the team being rested. I think they played the Sharks. Was that last year in the quarterfinals? And they played. They had like a number of guys, involved, but a lot of the guys rested as well. Obviously the famous game against Munster when they rested their entire team. And it kind of goes to the team selection that we might as well discuss that now. Like Jordy Barrett, starting him on the bench is the most egregious selection mistake I think I've ever seen. Like, just
why get him? Why go and get him?
Yeah.
Will, if you're not
going to
play him? No, but if you can't play him, why get him in the first place?
But Leo Cullen's claiming that he didn't have a restriction on playing him, that he just decided not to start him.
I don't know. Has he really answered that one definitively? Yes. I don't think he has.
Am I right? Am I right?
Every interview I've seen, I haven't heard him say, "I'm not allowed to start him in the." I've never heard him say, "No, that's not true. I'm not allowed." I don't think I've seen him say that, unless I'm wrong on that.
I think it was Rudd who put it to him. To be fair, last Friday, and he asked him, "Were there restrictions around you not selecting Jordy Barrett?" Because the sense from what we hear is that there are restrictions around RG Snyman when James Ryan and Joe McCarthy are fit, but not so for Jordy Barrett. And Leo Cullen, he started off by giving it a bit of a kind of wishy-washy, like it's very secretive, everyone wants to know, but then he followed it up and said, yes, I could have picked him. So he's on the record, Luke, as saying, yes, he could have started him. And also, let's go back to the quarter-final when Jordy Barrett delivered. Look, I know it was against a poor Glasgow team, but that performance was absolutely superb. And Robbie Henshaw was on the bench, so that to me would suggest that there were no restrictions in place for Leo Cullen and Leinster to select Jordy Barrett. It was. Look, it started leaking out early.
Do we think then he's doing the whole thing with the Healy for the first 20, Porter, Conan, Baird, everyone unloading on? Is this the kind of South African thing? Are we thinking that's what they were going with? Like that they were saying, oh, the most important part of the game is this. Is that what we're thinking that he?
I think he's trying to keep Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose happy. I think he's trying to play. I think it's like a political selection of we don't want to like disenfranchise some of our key guys too much because. On form, Jordy Barrett is the first name on the team sheet, and the fact that he only played 31 minutes, I just think is outrageous, and I don't see any rational explanation for it. Like it's a 30-year-old
unless there is a restriction.
But well, put it this way, Luke. If there's a restriction in place, then Leo and Leinster are being hung out to dry by not being able to tell their supporters. And it's not even just us, the media. Like Leo should be able to tell the supporters, this is the reason why I'm not being able to play. But now he's on the record as saying, yes, I could have selected him. So ultimately, I think the buck stops with Leo and Leinster.
Can I say one thing? It's so funny. If I see one more person, like, Nina Aber said it, I think Cullen said as well, on the selection, in hindsight, no. If Leinster had won that game by 25 points, it still would have been stupid. It still would have been crazy, and it still would have been wrong. It's not hindsight that has people saying this is crazy. Like you and Rudd were on the show with Joe last week, and it was a big. Even then, you were all like, "This is mad that he's not going to be starting." Like, and that was before a ball had been kicked. So, like, they're kind of like passing the buck on some of their terrible decisions by saying, "Oh, it's hindsight." Of course, like anyone can say that in hindsight, but that doesn't fly. Like, he's the form player in Europe. He was probably odds on to be European Player of the Year. If you have a restriction, there's no point in signing him. If you don't have a restriction, it's beyond belief that you
it was probably exacerbated by the fact that Robbie Henshaw, who is an unbelievable player in his own right, didn't have a great game, and I don't think he's had maybe a great season either. It'd be interesting to see what happens in terms of line selection this week, but it's just it beggars belief, and like I don't know. I know we'll probably get on and talk about Leo and what happens next and stuff, but I don't know if he's the best selector. I think we could go back over the last 2 years. You've touched on a few of them, Will, in big games. Obviously, the Jordy Barrett one is the one that's going to get the headlines now. But look, I didn't think Cian Healy should have been starting. I understand the logic that they're going for, but I think I would have had Jack Boyle there. I think Jack Boyle has played really well. This season, again, you're not going up against the sort of, a La Rochelle or a Toulouse pack. I think Jack Boyle would have given you much more energy. And I know Max Deegan came into the game on good form. And look, you want to be able to reward that. But I didn't think Max Deegan had a good game either. I think his problem has always been that his tendency to drift in and out of games. And you saw his offload for the Van der Fleer try, really good. But other than that, he was pretty anonymous, and it was telling that Jack Conan came off the bench 3 minutes into the second half. So they're three big calls, I think, Will and Luke, that Leo got wrong.
And I think, like, if you think about the start of the game, so, like, this to my mind is this kind of South African mindset. You guys know well what I think about these selection. Like, I think it's the biggest load of crap. I think their selection crap nearly cost them the World Cup with by far the best team in the World Cup in France. They'll argue that, oh, well, we beat everyone on the way there, but it kind of going, you beat people by like a point in some of those games with the best team, and then stuff with Pollard as well. They're dodgy selectors, lads. They're overthinking things way too much. Like, set out your stall at the start of the game. Rugby is not that complicated. Dominate the other team physically, or even get an edge, and you're halfway there to win in a game. That's it. It's not that complex. Start of the game, resource rucks properly. Make sure you're not throwing silly offloads. That is, like, picking Conan is for me a no-brainer there at the start of the game. Like, Northampton would have come into this game having doubts. No matter if everyone says they would, in hindsight, that they believe they could win the game. They believe it when you give them an opportunity. But Leinster are way too good for that. Blow them away at the start of the game. Just physically dominate. Stick it up the jumper. Put in an extra guy at ruck time if you need to. Get them up the guts. Like, if you think about what, like, the best thing about what Leinster's biggest advantage really over this Northampton team, it was the bench. It was the bench. So blow them away at the start of the game. That doesn't mean you hold until the second part of the game. It means that you blow them away from the start of the game. Take their belief away. And it was really frustrating to watch. I promised that when I came on that I wouldn't get too emotional, but I can feel the anger coming up me now. And I'm like, I want to hand over to someone else. But that really annoyed me watching the game. I was like, pick your best guys, blow them away at the start of the game, and bring on the cavalry with 30 minutes to go. But that means picking your best guys at the start of the game. You never give up the start of the game.
Like, again, this isn't hindsight. Like, when they picked their team for the Toulouse final last year and they kept Ryan and Van der Fleer on the bench, I was scratching my head being like, why are they just overthinking it? Like, they were 6 points down at half time in the final last year. Like, and despite having all the ball and all the territory and all the possession and all those chances around the line, Van der Fleer had a stormer when he came in. And I'm thinking, well, like, if they had him at the start of the game when they had all that possession, I think that could have really made a big difference. And then this time around, they're 12 points down with Geordie Barrett on the bench, with Jack Conan on the bench. And it's the Barrett one, which, is like, well, they both probably should have started. But for me, for the Barrett one in particular, like the Barrett one is just going to be like, we're going to be talking about that team selection, honestly, in like 50 years' time. If we're all still alive, we'll be like, geez, remember the time they had Geordie Barrett for 6 months in the prime of his life, and they said, we'll keep him on the bench. I honestly think that'll be one of the defining moments of like Leinster rugby in the history of when the book is written in like 50 years' time, Cian. I think it's that bad of a thing.
Like, I thought in terms of like Irish provincial selections in Champions Cup semi-finals, I didn't think Munster's selection of Alex Wooten ahead of Simon Zebo a few years ago, was it against Racing maybe, was going to be topped, but boy, did Leinster do it this week. And I think, and I totally agree with everything that you guys have both just said there, but I think one point that we haven't made in terms of putting your best team out, and I'm sure you'll agree, Luke, Leinster are not used to chasing a game. They hammer everyone most weeks. Why would you load your bench and, have guys there that are built for chasing a game? You get out there, you put a score on them early, and you use your bench to finish out the game. I just think they totally overthought it. And obviously, you look at the end game, which is worth talking about as well, and it goes back to sort of the mental fragility, I think, was the term I used. And look, I know that it might sound like a pretty harsh way, but I do think it's true. But you look at the muddled thinking on 75 minutes in terms of not going for the post, right? But also, like, Jack Conan had taken over as captain from Caelan Doris. He seemed to be looking to the sideline for guidance. And I'd love to get your take, Luke, in a sec. Having been a player on the pitch. Look, I understand that coaches will get messages down from the box, absolutely. But surely you didn't need any advice from the sideline for that decision. It was as obvious as anything at the time. And myself and Rod were sitting next to each other in the stadium, and we both said it. So this isn't like a hindsight thing either. Jack Conan, like I said, was looking to the sideline. You had Sam Prendergast there, who I think his inexperience actually across the whole 80 minutes had a couple of lovely passes to create tries, but I totally agree with Luke. His tackling was appalling, really, if we're being honest. But his inexperience at that moment showed as well, because I think a more experienced out half doesn't even ask the captain. He just puts the ball down and calls for the tee. You take the draw. You still have 5 minutes left, and you're in the ascendancy then in terms of going to extra time. And that, to me, that muddled thinking around that decision feeds into sort of the mental block I think that's come with Leinster.
And I think, look, the key thing, I think that's a really good point, Cian. So, like, a lot of people would say, they criticize kind of Joe Schmidt and say he's kind of an overbearing coach. But he always kind of backed you. And we would have had Leo, and we would have had Dricko, we would have had Johnny. That ball would have been out of everyone's hands before he even knew it. Like, Dricko would have been in there saying, or Leo would have said, points, lads. Like, if you think about, so what's your worst case scenario, right? Your worst case scenario is that you miss the kick, but you're going to be getting it back on the halfway line. I guarantee you Northampton don't, like, I know they did one short one in the first half, which in fairness took some, I thought it was a real statement of intent to take the short drop out, right? But you're getting the ball back. So it's not over. Do you know what I mean? So, like, the taking the 3 points in a position, if you think about where it is on the pitch, most kickers, even though Prendergast was not kicking well, most kickers, it's an over 75% shot that they're getting that kick. You know what I mean? Like, and I would say I'm being conservative on that percentage there. Even under the pressure, say the pressure at 70%, I'm still taking that because I'm getting the ball back anyway. Like, you'd have to be insane or unbelievably confident about your like what's going on with your restarts to go for a short one there. You're always getting that back in the halfway line, I think, from Northampton in that situation. They're going to go long. So I was just really disappointed with that one. I didn't think it made sense. I know what they were thinking, but it was the wrong decision there.
Just to come in on that one,
that's not even. Sorry.
Just to come in on that one, because like to play devil's advocate, going for the try there. The point is the same. They didn't score, but they did get the ball back, and they got another 5 meter opportunity. So the point stands for, if you miss the penalty, you get the ball back. They missed the chance to score the try, but they also got the ball back again. So it's not as if that was their last chance either.
No, but but like we're talking that's a point in time in the game, Will, where every other kick, you see even Toulouse on the weekend, they were not playing well. But they took easy points in front of the post. Like, that's still a high percentage kick to me. Like, you go back.
Well, Leinster did it early on, Luke, as well. Like, Sam Prendergast took the points early on, which sort of,
Yeah, and like, the game wasn't really, like, I don't know, Will. I just think, it's one of the toughest places to go and get a try is if you're in open play there. So I know, look, when I'm actually digressing. It's just a bad decision. You got to take that. You're getting the ball back, Will. You're getting the ball back. Yeah. Take your 75% chance to take this thing to extra time. You've got a deeper squad. You're playing at home. You've got momentum in the second half back in the game. Like, everything's going with you. Take the points, square it up, go back up the pitch if you get the kick. You're getting the ball back either way, I think. So it's a bad decision, I think.
Cian, I think that was a moment where the ghost of Champions Cup failures past came back to haunt Leinster, because I think it was did you have coach piece with Joe McCarthy?
Yeah.
He mentioned extra time and the Toulouse final and how extra time can get away from you, because you would have had the same thought last year when Kieran Frawley levelled it up at 15-all. They got a scrum penalty, and I remember thinking, geez, will they go for the corner here and go for the win? They kicked the 3-pointer. Obviously had a drop goal that they missed, but it went to extra time. And you would have thought then Leinster, the deeper squad, whatever. And Toulouse really turned it up. And I wonder, was that playing in their minds as well? That, geez, we went to extra time last year. Oh, it really got hairy there. Will we just go for the win here and put the game to bed? I really think that could have played a factor in some of the decision making. And just to add to what you were saying about the muddled thinking, it was complete panic and chaos. Like, at that moment, it was honestly like the meme of Michael Scott in The Office, like running around asking people to stay calm. Like, that's literally, like, Conan is cupping his ears, he's shouting, he's like roaring across the pitch. I was kind of like flabbergasted and baffled at how frantic it was. Yeah. And I just think it spoke. Sorry, Luke.
I think I will say I think they probably got a little bit unlucky not getting a penalty try at the end. Does anyone think that? I thought it was a bit unusual to give a yellow card when a guy is literally, like, he's there right on the line about to dot it down. So, like, similar to the one a couple of years ago where they, Ross Byrne got absolutely, like, cleaned for not taking the drop goal. I think they probably should have got a try there, and they got shafted by the ref. But, they still, Northampton, I think, deserved the win, and I think the muddled thinking is a good point to bring up. Like, the one question I'll ask you here is, did anyone think that's the right call to not take the shot at goal?
I thought at the time, watching it, go for the corner here.
Oh my God, no! Did you? Okay,
I did.
fair enough.
I,
No, but it's
right.
important
So
to know that. It's
why,
important to
that's
know
why
that.
when I said
Ian, what do
when
you
I
think?
said when
No,
I said I was
three
playing
points
devil's
all day.
advocate.
Said it at the time.
Yeah.
And like
So
just to go again to touch on the sort of this because it's probably the overarching point within this conversation, the mental sort of aspect to Leinster. I know, like when we were chatting last week, we didn't really pay too much heed to the Scarlets game the week before because it was such a changed team. But after the match, one quote, and I'm going to read it out now, quote for quote, word for word. One quote really stood out to me for Leo Cullen. So just bear with me here. I'm going to read it out. We knew the Scarlets would be up for the game because they've got so much to play for. It wasn't like things we hadn't discussed during the week, and I was a bit disappointed with the way our guys didn't really pitch up. Now, as comments go from Leo Cullen, that was pretty strong because he doesn't really usually say much in the media. And then I picked out another quote that he said after the match on Saturday. He was asked about the defence. There'd be a bit of head scratching there in terms of some of our mentality around defence. And were we really clued in enough for some of the threats that Northampton have? We've seen them in attack. The players have seen them. They know. But that's a big score to concede in a playoff game. Now, for me, those two comments are very, very similar in terms of these were the pictures we showed you and you still didn't deal with it. So I don't know, did Leinster have a tough 2 weeks training? Was the standards in training dropped? But something clearly went wrong, I think, behind the scenes for Leo Cullen to be questioning why his team didn't pitch up in the Scarlets, and then were they mentally on it defensively for the biggest game of their season. That to me is pretty damning.
Yeah,
and the reason he doesn't have to say much after most games, Cian, is because they're walloping everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, it's
and that does him no favors, Luke, as well. That does him no favors.
No, it doesn't, but like you still have to go out and wallop everyone every week, and there's a mentality around that. And I think maybe they're undervaluing these end of season games in the URC where you really put down a marker, and it's just the way it's just your way of doing business, if you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean? That's just what we do. Every week we pitch up.
Your point about Munster is so spot on. And obviously, look, their backs were against the wall but a couple of years ago. But the way they went on that run and played basically the same team, apart from a couple of injuries here and there, had them primed to peak then in that semi-final and going over to South Africa to win it. Leinster just haven't done that enough. And I think going forward next season, it is something they're going to have to address, because you can't just, like, your season can't just be about one game every year and then every year you're fluffing your lines. Like, it's shocking, really.
Yeah. Cian, you wrote about Sam Prendergast versus Finn Smith beforehand. I think Finn Smith was hands down the better player. I don't think that is, obviously it was obvious to anybody watching. How do you think Sam Prendergast played generally? Like, his defence obviously got a lot of spotlight, or the lack of it. The Henry Pollock try obviously was one moment. There was a couple of other moments that were singled out. Be very interesting to see what Andy Farrell does on Thursday. Like, for me, I don't think Sam Prendergast should be near the line squad at this moment in time. I just don't think he's developed enough to go on the tour. I think he would be much more benefit to him going this Ireland tour, and he's still very much finding his way. Like, he looked not at the level of a Champions Cup winning out half, I didn't think at all on Saturday. Like, not only his defence, but outside of some unbelievable passes, I thought his game management wasn't great. Some of his kicks were poor. His goal kicking was really poor. I thought, again, he snatched at a couple of kicks as well. Like, how did you assess his performance? Because that was another thing people pointed to. I kind of listed out 7 different things a few weeks ago that were different to last year. That was one of them. What did you think of him?
Yeah, just before that, I think you're right to touch on Finn Smith. I thought he was outstanding. I know he missed a couple of kicks conversions at the time. I was thinking, whoa, this could be a bit costly come the end of the game. But they're both the same age. They came through the same 20 system, but the difference in development was stark, really. Now, before Finn Smith joined Northampton a couple of years ago, he was playing regularly in the Premiership for Worcester before they went to the wall. And I think you can really see that physical development in the difference. And also, like, a mindset as well. Like, Finn Smith probably reminds me a bit of Jack Crowley. He's not afraid to take the ball to the line, and he's not afraid to put his body on the line in the defensive line. For me, the most disappointing thing about Sam Prendergast is that his defense seems to be getting worse. He's working with guys like, you would imagine, and Luke, you know him very well, Sean O'Brien, I would imagine, as the contact skills coach in Leinster, must be a great fella to be able to learn off. Andy Farrell is the Ireland head coach, one of the best defence coaches around. I know he hasn't been working with him during the Six Nations directly, but this has obviously been a problem since he broke onto the scene with Ireland last November, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And it's a pretty poor look as well. The amount of times he ends up on the ground going for ankle taps rather than actually just putting his body on the line. He's a big lad. I know he has a bit of filling out to do, but he's a rangy, stocky lad. But he doesn't. To me, it seems to be more like an attitude thing more than anything else. Sometimes his technique looks poor as well, but I think you've got to want to put your body on the line, Will. And like in terms of the line selection on Thursday, look, I totally agree with you. I think he'd be far more better off going on the Ireland tour, you know, putting on a few kg in the summer. But given the rate that Farrell has propelled him and accelerated his development, I would not be surprised if he's included. Would I agree? No, before people jump down my throat. But I wouldn't be surprised, lads, if Andy Farrell still picks him.
Luke, what's your perspective on Sam Prendergast and his performance at the weekend?
I'm not sure whether to start or end with this statement, but I think this guy will be... I'm going to start with it. I think he's going to be world class. But, and there's a big, big but, he has got a serious issue with his defense. And I've been calling this from day one. This problem is only going to get worse for him if he does not fix it. And he's got a problem with his feet. He's way, way too far away from all his contacts. His secondary work, aside from the initial hit, is just not good enough. He's not staying in the fight long enough. And I just don't think he places enough importance on it. Is the only thing I can really say. And I hate myself for killing a young guy like this, but this is a problem. And I would never, ever pick someone who doesn't tackle. I never ever would, guys, if I was a coach. It's not a good thing to say about a player. And I really feel bad saying about it. Saying about him. I hope he gets it fixed, because you can quite clearly see an attack. He will only get better. And I think his kicking is another thing. Young guys, like even Finn Smith, he had a few dodgy kicks as well in the weekend. I'm not as surprised at that part of things. I think that gets better throughout your career. And you can see he's got lovely technique. He's got the power. He'll get that stuff right. But I would never pick a guy who doesn't tackle. And he needs to get that fixed quickly. So he needs to get some weight on him. And he needs to get in and get some proper technique about his footwork and what he's doing with his hands, getting close to contact, and his mentality. Because he's a big guy, as Cian said. This shouldn't be a problem for him. So he's created a problem for himself now. It's not unfixable, but it's hard now because we're all going to be talking about it. And he also had some stuff like that was very unusual. If you saw, I think it was either the second or third try. It was off the line. Do you remember Northampton? I think it was for one of the Freeman tries. But he's in the backfield. Do you remember when they go outside? Hugo Keenan's very, very high up on the pitch, and they get it down. It's on Northampton's right hand side. They get into the middle of the pitch, right? Prendergast makes a tackle, but there's one more phase, and he's in the backfield kind of. But he ends up legging it over to the other side of the pitch with his back to play. Very unusual. I think it's a defensive system, by the way, but it's a very bad decision. And rule number one, you never have your back to play in anything, any part of any sport. Back to play, you're in big, big trouble, right? Second one was, or the second issue I'd highlight, aside from the Pollock one, which I think we all know, like he didn't even step. You have the angle. Pollock has the ball in the wrong arm, so he can't even fend. So Pollock can't even throw out the fend. You've got to make that tackle. But the other one that I really wanted to talk about was in the second half for that try that Northampton get. Watch him on the ground. He slips off a tackle, right? And he's complaining to the referee about a ruck. I think Leinster looked like they kind of had a poach, but the referee let it go. And he's in the back. He's sitting on the Northampton side of play on his arse with his hands up, kind of complaining to the referee when he should be getting back into the defensive line. And Northampton go in for another try on the right-hand side. I think Leinster now it's not great defense by Leinster. I think Keenan probably commits a little bit too early, even though he knows he's kind of short. He's down numbers, which I think he does for the other one too. But that's the defensive system, and he's very close to the line. So he's sticking to the system. But Prendergast is sitting on his arse complaining to the referee instead of getting back into the line. It's desperation stakes there. Honestly, go back and watch the game. They're big problems. That's just not understanding the game and the importance of defense and how important it is to be an extra man on the and positioning yourself in the right places. So I really feel like I've killed him there, and I really don't want to do that. That was not the intention, but it's a big problem for him, and I really want him to get it right. I promise you, I'm not one of those ex-players who. That kills me, that Leinster match in the weekend. I know I'm supposed to not be biased, but I still obviously have a bit of blue in me. that really hurt me watching that. And I wanted to go well for Leinster and for Ireland, for Prendergast to go well. But he's got to get the defence fixed. They're big, big problems. And he's got to play. Now, for him now, I hope he doesn't like gloss over this one and think that, you know, he needs to focus on the other parts of his game management and things like that. Those things will come, lads. Defence. That he's got to get that sorted right now, or you cannot pick him. You cannot pick him, guys. In a big game, you can't pick the guy.
Would you pick him on the Lions, Luke?
No, under no circuit. No, I've been very clear from the start on this one. Crowley's a better player for me at the moment. I'd have Crowley there ahead of him. I know, like, he's got beautiful hands, lovely skills, the big kick. You can't tackle. I'm never picking you. Simple as.
Yeah, I don't think you're being like everyone saw it at the weekend. I think it's important to give an assessment, and as someone who's obviously always brought up defence in the show, it's good to get your perspective on that. Cian, just to give Northampton a little bit of love, you know, you mentioned Fitzgerald was unbelievable. Henry Pollock, can't wait to see if he's picked on Thursday. He's like a form back row in Europe probably at the moment. You know, Joanno Augustus, who's coming to Ulster next season, like that little offload for Freeman's try. Freeman himself is playing absolutely out of his skin as well. James Round was such a threat in the backfield. You know, he was really kind of making Leinster pay at various stages. There's a lot of unsung heroes then in the pack who, you know, probably most fans outside of Northampton probably aren't even aware of. But it was just a tactical a performance that was a real masterclass in so many ways. I can't wait to see what they do against Bordeaux. Like, part of me thinks Bordeaux could end up winning it well, and part of me thinks it could be an absolute cracker that Northampton snatched the end. I don't know, but it was a great day for Northampton, and you have to give them so much credit as well.
Yeah, and glad you kind of mentioned the unsung heroes in the pack. I thought Josh Kemeny was very good. Alex Coles, like, you look at the job they did on, I know Leinster scored one maul try, but you look at the job that they did on the Leinster maul, it was absolutely outstanding. Now, they rode their luck a couple of times. They conceded a couple of penalties in that first half, but that's what you have to do. And look, I think I would be shocked if Henry Pollock isn't going to be named in the Lions squad. I think if he keeps going like this for the rest of the season, I think there's a shout that he could even be in the starting 23 for the Lions, very much in the bolter category. He was sensational, and his try sums that up. I thought Alex Mitchell at scrum half was excellent. Like, he had a pretty injury hit Six Nations, but he looks back to his best. I didn't think Gibson Park was anywhere near his best. We mentioned Finn Smith, Tommy Freeman. I mean, he's the starting Lions right winger at the moment, isn't he? I mean, scoring tries for absolute fun. Himself and Finn Smith have a brilliant relationship. We've seen that with England as well. I think Finn Smith will probably be the starting 10 over there as well. And I think as a whole, like, I was chatting to Phil Dowson, their head coach, last week on a call, and I think Northampton are such a classy club. You've seen the way, you know, Saracens threw in the towel in terms of the Champions Cup this season. And I think it would have been very easy for Northampton to do that as well. They're Premiership champions. They're down in 7th, isn't it? They haven't been going well this season domestically, so I think it would have been easy for Phil Dowson and Sam Vesty to say, look, we'll just focus on the Premiership, we're not going to win the Champions Cup anyway. But this is a lesson, I think, for all teams who, you know, don't believe they can win it. Like, it was fully deserved. I think Sam Vesty, like you touched on, Will, is one of the best attack coaches around. I think he has been for a long time. I think it would have been brilliant actually to see him as part of the Lions tour. Phil Dowson played in that final in 2011, so he understands, I think, what this competition means. I was there in 2000 when Northampton beat Munster. Pat Lam was the captain in Twickenham. Like, they're a really proud club. I've been over there a few times. Franklin Gardens is a great place to watch rugby. I think, Luke, you've said it's a great place to play as well. And you can't but be happy for a club like that, you know, taking off the sort of the Irish tinted glasses. And the same with Bordeaux. I was obviously in Bordeaux a few weeks ago for the Munster Bordeaux game. Their supporters are phenomenal. They're a really classy club as well. And I think it's going to be a great final, Will, just to go back to your point. I hope neither team tightens up and they actually kind of stay true to their roots, because that was one of the big problems for Leinster at the weekend, lads, is that it actually became a bit like a Premiership game in terms of how loose it was. Like, you look at the scores that are racked up in the Premiership week in, week out, where defence is pretty optional at times in the Premiership. There's such a big focus on the attack. And Leinster, I thought, just fell into the trap, and it became that fast and loose game, whereas they should have been the ones putting the squeeze on Northampton. So Leinster side, I think it's going to be a great final. I think a great final. Two brilliant attacking teams and two classy clubs.
Yeah, just on Northampton, you made the point about them prioritising Europe or giving it a good shot, like because they had to go to Pretoria and play the Bulls as well, which we've seen in Europe. That's pretty much always been a second string team. But they said their first team they won in Loftus Versfeld, something Leinster weren't able to do last year in the URC semi final, and that really set them on a path to get a good seeding in the knockout stages, which is so important to progress. And obviously, mentioned Phil Dowson, like a sweet revenge for 2011. I'm sure he was thinking, albeit at some stage in the second half, he was probably thinking, God, if I'm involved in the 2 games against Leinster, that would big comebacks.
The scenes in their coaching box as well, Will. Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
they were relaxed. They were enjoying themselves
from early on. And like we talk about, possibly Leinster's team selection filtering into the Leinster players in terms of that bit of complacency. But like Phil Dowson, Sam Vesey and the Northampton coaches from very early on were high-fiving, they were smiling. Not always when things were going super well for them, but I think that was reflected in the players as well. Particularly like someone like we go back to Henry Pollock and Finn Smith. Just utterly fearless. They didn't have this weight of expectation, this mental block that Leinster have. And it showed that when you play a bit looser, you play a bit freer, this is what can happen. So I thought just the scenes in the coaching box were stark throughout the game, whereas it looked like Leinster's coaching box was just like deep frustration throughout. So I thought that was an interesting point as well.
Yeah, and as the game wore on, it fell onto the pitch. Like Leinster, a few knock-ons, like Sam Prendergast dropping off a line out late on. You're thinking this looks like the pressure of the occasion is getting to them. Luke, it's probably a tough one for you to answer because I know you know Leo Cullen well, but these 10 seasons after including this one Champions Cup in that time. Leinster have lost 4 home knockout games in the last 4 seasons. Leinster's home record, you would assume that they will always win a home knockout game, but they've lost 4 times at home in the last 4 seasons. La Rochelle, Northampton, they lost to the Bulls, and they lost to Munster. And I know, like, the Munster one, they picked a ridiculous team, but that's part of being the coach as well. Is it time for him to go, do you think? Is it time for Leinster just to, like, try to turn the page and get someone? I know, like, Neen Aber probably does a lot of coaching there, and Leo has a different role. But even with that, if Leo picks the team, which is what we're led to believe, like, that part of the game has been really weak as well. Like, where does Leo Cullen go from here, let alone Leinster?
Oh, it's such a difficult question, I thought there was going to be big pressure on him this year to get it done, and like there is massive pressure. Like I still think, look, Leinster ultimately are kind of judged, I think, just in terms of where they are on the silverware. I think if he wins the league, you can't fire a guy who wins the league, I don't think, or I certainly wouldn't be proposing that, But I do think that takes on extra importance for him now. They need some silverware big time. So they need to really go for that competition. I think the last couple of years, it's a bit of a combination for me of them not getting it over the line. As is the case with most of these things, it's not just the coaching box. You know what I mean? Like there's the players, I think, as well, have got a lot to answer for there. Like I don't think, like what changed on the weekend that the defense was so poor. Like it was so like that's not a coaching thing to me, Will. That isn't the coaching thing to me. Like that's like you go down. I think I saw someone put out, I think it was that New Zealand journalist put out Leinster's tackle percentage, because tackle completion percentage was 71%. Like that's
they missed 36 tackles.
I think it might have, was it even, but maybe whoever it was. See, he said about 40, I think was it looked like, but yeah, 36, whatever. So same kind of number. Like that's not a coaching thing, Will. Is it? Like, am I wrong? Like I don't think like I'm not blaming. I don't love Nina Barr's system. I'm on the record as saying that, right? I love it for South Africa, but I don't think I love it for Leinster, right? And like that's not his fault that guys are missing those tackles, is it? I certainly wouldn't have that opinion. And like that to me was the undoing of this Leinster team, is the defense. The selections I don't agree with, but I still think Leinster had enough to go out and win that game. Like I tilt this more towards the players. To be honest with you, I like the coaches are not without fault in this, but I wouldn't be calling for anyone's head. Will, I don't think that's right. I think he's done a brilliant job with this team. They need to figure out how to get over the line. I think they thought it was going to be Nina Barr. I think they thought it was going to be Barrett, who they didn't select, which is very unusual. And I think I think the game management is something that they really have to go back and have a think about. Like even at the start of the second half. Do you remember? You guys might remember this. Remember at the start of the second half? I think there's a nice bit of play. Leinster get a line out from a penalty on the halfway line, and they throw like they go to the first line out of the second half, and you're going, okay, right, let's get a grip of this thing here. they go to throw over the back to James Lowe. Do you remember this one over the top of the
Yeah.
line out? Like, I'm sitting there going, what? Who is calling that play? Like, honestly, who's calling that play? Like, let's just put a marker down. Let's drive these lads 10 meters. Let's beat the crap out of them for 15 phases, even if we don't go anywhere. Let's just wear them down. Maybe I think about the game in very, very simple terms, but I'm like, what is going on? Who's making those calls? Do you know what I mean? I look at them and even at the end, like the last decision. So I don't know. I don't know who's at fault. I think everyone's a little bit at fault, but mainly I'm tilting towards the players. Will, like, you just can't miss that many tackles. You can't make that many unusual decisions. Like, there's no way the coaches are going out to them to say, well, every time you even get half a sniff of an offload, go for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would never be saying that to a team in a final. Like, no matter how much better Leinster are, right? There's still 23 other men who do this job as like it's their job. Like, you have to think that they're going to be showing up physically. You have to think that they're going to have prepared and have something. They're going to throw something that you don't think of at this stage of the competition. So I don't know. I feel like it's a complacency amongst the group out there. I know you asked me about Leo, but he's not without fault. I don't agree with some of the decisions. Leo, he's my captain, and he's a friend, so it's really difficult to say. I don't agree with some of the selections, but I also think that, you know, most of the blame will lie with the players, as it always is. Like, we would never have blamed Joe Schmidt if we came away and having not won some of those big games, or Michael Cheika. Like, at the end of the day, we had guys on the pitch like Dricko who are going to be leading you. Johnny Sexton is going to be leading you, making more right decisions than not under pressure. And like, nearly, I don't remember Johnny Sexton making a bad decision under pressure. Do you know what I mean? Or Dricko, or Leo himself on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? Jamie Heaslip, Sean O'Brien. Like, whereas I do see that with this team over the last couple of years. I just see some dodgy decision making at kind of key moments and kind of not showing up in the basics of the game and in the big, like, those teams I were on would never have missed 36 tackles in a semi-final. Never. No matter if you're playing the All Blacks, we wouldn't have missed 36 tackles. Do you know that kind of way? So I don't know, guys. I feel like I'm not. I promise you, I'm not avoiding your question. I just feel like it's not right to given how well his job is to, you know, in my opinion, get the best people in to coach the team. I think he's done that with Nina Barr, or certainly he's considered the best. Has he built an unbelievably, like, the depth chart in Leinster is unbelievable. Has he done a brilliant job with that, guys? Are they supplying the bulk of the international team? That is Leo's job to a certain extent. Has he done the selection thing right? I wouldn't agree with all of it, but I wouldn't be firing a guy off the back of that. I think he's done a brilliant job at Leinster.
Well, they still haven't won many trophies, though, considering the talent they've had. Like, I agree with some of the points you made there. I do agree with, like, you know, some of the positive points you made with the team selection and just failing to deliver the trophies. Ultimately, he is the head coach. Like, so you have to, you're not going to be able to replace 30 players, like, not that you'd want to, with the quality they have.
The thing about it is, Will, and I do agree, like, Leo Cullen has done a lot of good work. Like, even the stuff we don't get to see in terms of the academies, that everything is aligned. Like, he has done great work in that. But, like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and not getting the results. Leinster, look at what they did in the last 18 months / 2 years. Last summer, they changed their recruitment policy. They went back and they started signing, you know, the best players in the world in terms of Orji Sinoiman and Jordy Barrett, and Rabbi Slimani has been a really good signing as well. They went out and they got Jacques Nienarber, double World Cup winning coach, and they've now changed their DNA, which Luke has sort of touched on as well, in terms of, you know, putting the emphasis on the defence. It hasn't worked either. So in Leo's defence, he has been willing to change. He was the one who went out and got Stuart Lancaster as well. So he has been willing to change, but he hasn't been able to find the right answers. And it goes back to the team selection. The buck ultimately stops with him. And look, I think I was writing about this. I think Leo Cullen, as much as I can know him from dealing with him over the years, is a fundamentally good man. I think he is also a very intelligent man. And I think he will know now that he is under massive pressure. The players have made no secret of the fact that they judge themselves off Champions Cups, not URCs.
As I said, one Champions Cup win in 10 years, 4 home knockout defeats in 4 years. Haven't won a URC since the South African teams joined. This might sound hyperbolic and like knee-jerk after the weekend, but I stand over it. I defy someone to come back with a different team. This is the most underachieving group in the history of rugby, I would say, considering the talent they have, the opportunities they've been in big games. This is a team that should have won 3-4 Champions Cups potentially in a row. Like maybe people think that's stupid and like get someone in
And
Ireland.
New Zealand not winning since like it took them how long was it 20 years to 20 years before they won a World Cup, and they're the best team.
That's every 4 years. That's the one you pointed. That's every 4 years. It was kind of different groups at different times.
Sorry, I was actually answering the question. I don't think you wanted to. I'm disrupting.
I think it's also worth mentioning that the La Rochelle team, who won the couple of Champions Cups, were an awesome team. Toulouse winning last year, awesome team. So it's not like I agree with you. Like the rich resources that they have, they should have won a couple more Champions Cups. But it's a bloody tough competition to win as well. And those particular teams over the last few years, Toulouse and La Rochelle, have been exceptional. Now the problem for Leinster is it had opened up for them this year. Look at the way Toulouse played at the weekend against Bordeaux. Like, it was there for them of all years. I know we say it every year. This was the year that it was really there for them. And I think of all the finals that they've lost, the last 3 in a row, I think this semi-final will probably hurt even more.
Well, and I guess when I say underachieving, obviously the trophies is the piece I'm mainly pointing to, but I'd also say that they have consistently not delivered their best in these games as well. It'd be one thing if they went toe-to-toe, played an 8 out of 10, and Northampton played 8.5. But we're routinely, we said, Joe, we've done this 5 years in a row, we've had our debrief. We're routinely pointing to like 5 or 6 head-scratching moments, or moments where the thinking was muddled, or moments where their game management was really off, or moments where they made really uncharacteristic mistakes. That's as much as the underachievement in terms of how much their performance has kind of dipped in the biggest game of their season.
And they also have never won the URC since South Africa's big teams have joined. Like, that is an issue as well. Like, I understand, again, that, look, the players are obsessed with winning this 5th star, but your bread and butter is the league. What's the point in finishing top of the league most seasons? I know they didn't last year, if you're not going to go on and deliver it. So they need to sort of accept that the URC...
obsessed with winning, Cian.
Exactly.
Winning. And like that, it goes to like not picking a big team for the Scarlets. Like, you need to be, it's winning. Whatever you're in, you want to be obsessed with winning. I think that's such a good point you're making. So I know you're in the middle of it, but I just think that point, like winning, it's not just, this competition, that competition. Whatever you're in, you need to be winning.
Yeah.
If you've got the best team, you need to win.
There's only 2 competitions to win every year. And like I said, the amount of work that they put into URC, and I know it's been touched on as well, and we dissected it at the time, but I go back to not playing the strongest team in the URC semi-final against Munster. What was it that you said? I think, Luke, it always stood in my mind that, you don't ever give anyone a sniff, particularly not your rivals in Munster, and you don't give Northampton a sniff. And I think that that's what they did at the weekend in terms of their team selection and just being mentally off it from the word go.
I'm so glad you rounded back in the team selection thing, because I think that's a key point, Will. You never give someone a sniff. You don't give someone momentum in sports. If you have momentum, you keep it, because if you give it, you might never get it back. Honestly, like, it's such a big thing in sports, momentum, and it's so hard to get it back. Like, I think that's why people were so amazed at Rory McIlroy in the I know I'm going on a complete tangent, but in the Masters, like, giving up momentum, it's unbelievably difficult to do what he did. And Leinster, South Africa in the World Cup as well. I just thought it was just a function of how good that team was. You always pick your best guys to start. Who's playing the best? Who's playing the best? Who are my best guys? Who can I rely on? Like, what am I trying to achieve here? And let's keep it relatively simple at the start of the game. Let's just beat the crap out of them. Like, rugby is not that. It's not as complex as I think they're making it out to be. Beat them up physically. They could have beat that Northampton team up physically. I don't often think that about the French teams. I think you have to muscle up with them. Some of them are huge, but they could have beaten up that Northampton pack, and they opted, I think, to not do that, which I think is, I'm sure someone in there would say that's completely wrong. But whatever they showed up with at the start of the game wasn't their best guys. Do you know what I mean? I think that's bizarre. Absolutely bizarre.
Well, it's not a good sign that I would say the 2 most head-scratching, baffling, terrible team selection decisions I can remember watching rugby was Leinster against Munster in 2023 and not having Jordy Barrett in the starting team this year. They're probably the two ones I go to.
What about Porter and Conan? Baird even at 6. Like, I find that. I know I can kind of understand the Conan thing because it doesn't really imbalance you, Will. But what about not the Porter thing on the bench and like Porter's?
Well, they want him for the last hour. Like, as in, if you're getting an hour out of Porter, having him 20 to 80 makes more sense than having him 0 to 60
out of Porter. They're nearly getting 80 minutes out of that guy every week. Like, why restrict yourself to 60 with him?
And it goes back to the point that I made. Leinster are not used to chasing teams. So put your best team on it, build a lead, and then bring, if it's Cian Healy off the bench for the last 15
Yeah.
minutes to see out the game.
That's been working for them. Why change? I thought it was bizarre to change it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
that seems like a South African inspired thing though to me. Not a that doesn't seem like a Leinster way of picking a team. As far as none of the Leinster teams I played in anyway.
Yeah, well, it got a bad weekend, got worse for Caelan Doris. He's going to be having a shoulder procedure, is the terminology I believe Leinster are floating. We don't yet know what this means for his Lions' chances, other than to say it can't be good for them. He was in the frame to be captain, that probably looking unlikely now. He might be back potentially for the tour, but he might also miss the tour and potentially some of next season. We don't yet know, so we'll be waiting for Thursday's announcement to maybe get some clarity from Andy Farrell. I think we'll probably wrap it up there, guys. Cian, it is funny we've done this show 5 years in a row together, and we've done it collectively 7 years in a row. Like it's funny how we just keep coming back to the same place. It is like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. I feel like we talk through the whole season, and we look at the pool games, and we look at the knockout games, and we're waiting for the end of the season, and then we have our big debrief. And then I ask Luke who'll win it next year, and he says, "Oh, I fancy them to do it next year." That's literally how every single year has gone.
In my defense, I'm pretty sure I had said, now to be fair, I said Toulouse, but I didn't really buy into the whole Leinster thing throughout it. I thought Toulouse were still the team to beat. And I'm sure, yes, we will be here next year, hopefully talking about obviously a Leinster or even a Munster win, as a long shot as that would be. But yeah, that goes back to the point. Like, what's the definition of insanity? Is doing the same things over and over again, and they keep coming up short, and no one seems to be able to have the answers as to why that is.
But by that definition, I don't think they are insane, Cian, because they've changed things. Like, they actually have changed things. They've brought it. They changed the transfer policy. They've changed the coaches. So they're not insane. I don't think. I don't know. That was the big argument they have, is that, like, they're not actually insane. Like, it's just, I think the player group, they're struggling in the player group to get over this hump. Like, it feels like a Mayo type vibe to me. Like,
well, the funny thing, people making Mayo comparisons. It would be like if it was Jim Gavin's Dublin that lost in every final, because that's what Leinster are. That's the advantages they have. That's the money they have. That's the players they can buy. Mayo are underdogs. Leinster are favourites. Leinster are the big team that can't get over the line. I actually don't think I struggle for any sporting comparisons, like, of teams with this kind of level of talent and resources that just can't win, that have just forgotten how to win. Like, Leinster won 3 out of 4 and, didn't lose the Champions Cup final. They won their first 4 finals they've been in, and ever since then, it's just been struggle after struggle. As I said, we've had so many debriefs, and they've always been meaty and juicy and full of things to talk about, because the games have always been so ridiculous. Like, Leinster have always shot themselves in both feet and done things they don't usually do, and guys who usually play 9 out of 10 give 6 out of 10s. It's mad that we're here, but yeah, I suppose that's sport, and that's why we love it in some ways.
I won't lie. I'm feeling worse about the weekend after that chat than I am. I've got to go to that bloody awards dinner thing tonight as well. Like, Jesus,
I'd say that'll be a right laugh. All right.
Oh, somber. But I'm kind of going.
I believe Joe.
I'm actually depressed now. Seriously,
Joe Malloy's going to be interviewing Geordie Bard up on stage. I wonder what his first question might be after the weekend.
Me. Oh, God.
Well,
Jesus.
If there's any constellation, you guys have to go back to work. I'll be going to the swimming pool here on the Gulf of Naples to enjoy the rest of my afternoon. But for now, I'd like to thank Luke for joining me. I'd like to thank Cian for joining me. I'd like to thank you all for listening to yet another Leinster Champions Cup collapse debrief. We'll be back next week, obviously reacting to that big Lions announcement on Thursday. So much intrigue and so much interest, especially after last weekend, which probably threw up some late, selection headaches for Andy Farrell. But until then, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.